everyone. My name is Desislava. Uh, for everyone, Desi. Usually it's only my mom who calls me Desislava when she's very angry. So all of my friends, colleagues, and people use Desi as it's also easier to pronounce. But as Don mentioned, I'm a product designer. I have been in that space for the last 9 years. I have been mostly focusing working with startups and scale-ups, which means that I have been in phases where from a very small company, they are growing, and usually this creates quite a lot of growing pains and challenges in the ways of working, in the ways of communicating, and quite often it's also how you go on to discover new problem spaces. And this is a little bit of what I'll be talking about later today. But before we get to that, enough about me. Now I'll get to the part where you're probably wondering why we were split up in different groups, what were all of the slots about, and what of all of those envelopes there. But I have a little challenge for you. Some of you might have heard about this one. I'll explain what it is in a moment. But basically, we'll be doing the Marshmallow Tower Challenge. I want you all to take it very seriously. We're going to have a winner today, so I want you to put all in. I also have a little present for the team that goes first. Those are some really nice brownies, vegan, gluten-free, so you have no excuse not to go for them. But the Marshmallow Tower Challenge. So in the brown envelopes that you have on the table, that's where you have all of the needed materials for the challenge. There are some papers under it. You can leave them, you'll use them later, but you can all get and take out what's in the brown paper bag. So basically you should have a marshmallow, you should have 20 spaghetti sticks, you should have some sellotape, and you should have also some thread in there. So using all of those materials, what you need to achieve is try to create a freestanding structure using only those materials with the marshmallow on top. So the entire marshmallow must be on the top of your tower, and also your tower must not be leaning. You shouldn't be holding it at the end. It shouldn't be hanging from the ceiling. Basically, it should be on the table and should be freestanding structure. You can use as much or as little of the materials as you want. You can cut them, you can break them, you can do whatever. Apart from the marshmallow, please don't cut it, please don't eat it. If anyone wants a marshmallow, I do have a bit more in the back, so just give me a signal when I bring some over, but please don't eat the one from the back. And yeah, you will have 8 minutes to do that before I set the timer. Please start opening your envelopes, see that you have everything that you need inside. If not, I have some backup materials. Is there any question or anything that I can answer before we start the challenge? No? Okay, I can see people are already taking out things. I saw that you almost lost your marshmallow. Be careful. Okay, it looks like we're all done. Okay, if we're all ready, please focus for a second. Table 1, all ready? Have any questions? No? Okay. Then we are going, maybe my timer is not working, so I'm going to use my watch, but you all have 8 minutes to create your structures, starting now. You remember you cannot be holding the structure that you created, so please step away. We're going to have now people going around and measuring the results. Wow, can I please get all of your attention back? Someone will be measuring your structures, but now for the moment, please look at me. I know we're all excited, but I wanted to tell you a bit more. It should be to the marshmallow on top, so marshmallow included. Okay, everyone, while we are getting the results, I wanted to tell you a little bit about results in general, because that's a challenge that has been made with many different groups of people. Just to tell you, if you're trying to compare the results, usually this is done in 18 minutes, not 8, so you had a little bit less time than others, so don't compare yourself directly to that. But I wanted to point out something different. So if you take a look, the groups of people that this challenge has been made, that's an actual research that has been done with quite a lot of people. It has been done with professionals, C-level, kindergarteners, architects, and engineers. And usually the average is about 20 inches of height for the structures that they have been making. For anyone who doesn't get inches, that's about 50 centimeters. I had to translate it for myself. But basically, there's only two groups that usually did way better than the average. So it's not a surprise that architects and engineers did quite better. That's something that they're doing quite often. But there's one group, which is kids in a kindergarten, that performed about 10 inches better than average from the rest of the groups. And to try and explain why this happens, it's not about one group being smarter than the other. I wanted us to go over a few concepts about how we take decisions, how our behaviors are affected by the way our brains work. So the first thing, some of you might have heard about heuristics, but that's basically mental shortcuts that we take when we are trying to take a decision. Usually those are things that we don't notice when they work well. So this is really helping us with cognitive load when we need to take daily decisions. And we don't notice them. They're extremely useful and they help to facilitate faster decision making. However, when those shortcuts don't really work the way that expect or don't produce the results that we find to be useful or good, we often call those things biases. Just to give you an example of what this might be. So if you go to the cinema, you're not very hungry, but you want to get some popcorn. If you are presented with those two choices, you'd most probably walk away with the small ones because that's what you want. It's kind of like easy, you compare them, price is kind of like equal, you get what you're paying for. But if you walk into the cinema with the same intention, but you're presented with those three choices for popcorn, all of a sudden the small ones don't seem to be that appealing. You have the mid-range, which is only 50 cents cheaper than the big ones, and the big ones actually give you a lot more popcorn. So it's very probable that you're going to walk away with the big packet of popcorn when you wanted to get the small one. This is called decoy effect. It's one of those biases, and it's one of those biases where our brain just tries to perceive what's the better decision for us. That's quite often used in marketing, so they can be used in better or worse way. But basically, this is what we mean whenever we speak about biases. So it's when those shortcut and those decisions are not giving us the desirable effects that we want. Another thing to point out, those are habits. I'm sure you're all familiar with those ones. Those are basically repeated behavior that are usually triggered by some cue or something happening in our environment. The interesting bit I wanted to share with you is that about 40% of the actions that we take on daily basis are usually habits, and we don't even realize that we have those automated behaviors happening. This is what's making habits really hard to form and also really hard to break old ones. So with the knowledge of how we facilitate decision making and how we also perform some of our actions, I wanted to go back and try to understand why some of those kids in kindergarten perform better in this challenge. And the answer is that a lot of those kids, they don't really have the same knowledge about the world. They don't have the same assumptions that would help them to make the shortcuts, or they don't have behaviors that they have been performing for a long time. So naturally, instead of trying to decide what exactly they want to do or where they're going, they naturally go and do what they know best, which is playing and iterating and trying different things. So basically, through the process of just trying and failing, they usually reach to a better outcome because they go through a quicker iteration of the actual challenge and what they're trying to achieve. Uh, and if we put this into the product development context, what I was trying to say is that usually those heuristics and behavior can be really, really helpful for efficiency in processing and decision making, also whenever we need to perform some actions. So they definitely are very useful. But if we lean too much on them, on the flip side, what can actually suffer is innovation and the value we are bringing for customers. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about continuous discovery and how this can actually help us get away from relying too much on previous knowledge and assumptions and have more of this iterative mindset. So before we start with the continuous product discovery, I would like to see where we are with the actual results from the towers.
Can you read my writing?
Okay. Oh,
This is the winner.
all right. So we have our first place, which is 47.5. That's very close also to our average. So we have just confirmed some of the results, but that's the slot laundries. Woo! Well done. Take it on those ones. Yes, get them over. For the rest of you, we can share later what were the rest of the results. If someone wants to get, I don't have any more of the candies, but if somebody wants some marshmallow, as I said, please do come over. I'm going to share some with you. Now, going back to the continuous product discovery. So I just wanted to go quickly over the definition of what it is. And what I'm going over here, I don't know if you have heard of Teresa Torres and Continuous Discovery Habits. That's a book that she has written in the last few years. So some of the definitions and concepts are from there. I'm going to be sharing the book later on, so don't worry, you can take a look. But quite a lot of it has been taken from the area where she has been developing a lot in the recent years. So she's also a really good person to follow. She's quite active. But continuous discovery is basically a process. It's another way of working. But the important thing to point out is that this is something that the whole product team should be involved into. This is not something that product designers are doing by themselves, product managers. You'd expect also engineers to be involved and engaged with that, or basically anyone who has anything to do with the product delivery and is working on this team. Another important thing, as we said, is to be doing that continually. So that's something that's ongoing. It's not just an ad hoc activity whenever we want to prove or validate something. It should be something happen continuously alongside other things and delivery. It's about the user needs and focusing on the unmet needs and the users. It can employ different research activities. So, for example, what Steph was talking, jobs to be done can be part of that, and very often is. Um, it is very important that you go to assumption testing and understanding if what you have found out, it's actually helping you reach a desired product outcome. So this is basically the definition of what it is. Just going over it again, it's a continuous process where product teams are performing different research activities to uncover user needs and reach desired product outcomes. Another way to think about product continuous discovery is a mindset shift of how organizations usually are doing some work. So if you look at what I have on this side, on the vertical, I have risk, and on the horizontal, I have time. If we think about the challenge that we did earlier with the marshmallow and what I shared about kids and iterating, usually what happens is that whenever we spend a lot of time just basing some work or trying to deliver something on assumption that we haven't really tested, or we don't know if that's really going to cover some unmet needs for our users, the longer we spend time developing something without validating that or testing it, the higher the risk is that at the end, our tower is not going to be freestanding and it's not going to be the highest possible one. Compared to continuous discovery, this is all of the kind of green bits where you see that there's the continuous iteration in smaller chunks. So you go through some process where you do work on smaller ideas and understand if those are the ones that are going to contribute to the outcome that you want. So what we're going to do now, actually, we're going to zoom in and just speak a little bit more about what goes into this product discovery cycle. Before that, I think Steph's really touched on the outcome-driven results, and I also wanted to say that the really important thing also for continuous discovery and all of those processes is to change and think about outcomes versus outputs. I have put the definitions out there just to make sure that we're all on the same page, but when we're speaking about outputs, that's some tangible product or deliverable created as a result of a process. So if we're thinking about product, that might be some feature, that might be some design that we have worked on, but basically it's something tangible. Whereas when we speak about the outcome, that's the change, that's the impact that we want to see as a result of someone using the feature or the output that we have created. So it's really important that we have a very well-defined product outcome that we want to reach. So basically understanding what are the goals or the objectives and how they also align with the business goals that we are having. I'm not going to be talking a lot more about that. Again, if you look into product outcomes and the recitors, there's a bit more on that. But just wanted to point out that it's really important to have this as a definition and as a ground base to what we are doing, because otherwise we won't be successful in the activity and we'll probably be wasting time trying to do something. Going back to what goes into the continuous discovery, again, I won't go into detail of all of this, but this is basically how we can imagine what should happen in a cycle of a continuous discovery. First bit connected to customers, that's a really important and sometimes challenging bit where you need to make sure that you have some touch points that are happening on a regular basis with your customers. In the example that I have been looking at, Teresa Torres, she's speaking about weekly touch points. I found in the organizations that I have been working, when we tried to implement that and start working in this way, weekly was way too much. We couldn't really handle it. So I'll be talking a bit later on what's the timeline that we used. But basically, to summarize, we want to have some ongoing continuous touch points with our customers that are happening on a regular basis. Next bit, once we have performed the research activities, we want to find opportunities. Again, I think Steph mentioned quite a lot about what are opportunities, what are some of the unmet needs, how those ones shouldn't really contain any solutions. So here we are just speaking about something in the problem space, some unmet needs. The more you do of those, the more of those you'd probably find out. And a really important next step is to really understand which are the ones that we want to work on. Usually it's good to try and focus on one or two opportunities, and that's why I have actually highlighted prioritizing, because that's another area where teams do try to spread too thin and try to work on too many things, which doesn't allow for this iterative kind of like smaller chunk works. In terms of prioritization, again, a very interesting thing that you can look into is something called opportunity trees. That's where you start with your outcome, and then you can try to branch out from the bigger goals towards some of the smaller ones and understand where you want to focus your time and efforts, at least in this cycle. After you have done that, that's when you start thinking of actual solutions. That's when you think how we can solve that. And you can come up with a few different ways depending on your capacity on how you want to solve that in order to test if any of those solutions are going to help you reach the outcome. So that's basically the last thing where it's really important that you test and measure. And if those ones are not contributing to the desired outcome, you should basically go back to the opportunities, prioritize a new one, and just do that again. Basically, the idea is that all of those things, as I said, should be happening continuously alongside any other activities that you're doing in your product organization. As I said, I'm not going to be focusing on all of them today. It's way too much. But I wanted to share a bit more about the first bit, which is connected to customers. And that's also an approach where when you're trying to implement something new, you don't always have to do everything perfectly from the beginning. Try with small steps, try to see how we get there step by step. And I want to tell you about a practical example where we try to actually start doing the connected to customers bit. We wanted to start having those regular sessions with our customers. This is a program that I have worked on while I was at Dojo. And as I told you, one of the big challenges was that trying to do something more frequently on a weekly basis or even bi-weekly basis, it was really, really difficult. We didn't have the capacity. It was overwhelming for people. People didn't have time on their calendars. So we kind of like opted and we decided to trial 1 month research schedules. What's in here It's quite a typical research schedule, so there isn't anything way too surprising. I'm going to go over a few of those things, but as a next step, you have seen that there are some papers that we'll be using later. So actually, instead of me talking all of the time, I wanted today, at the end of the session, to try and see how we can do and go over some of those steps together and finish with doing a mini interview in the groups that we are having. Don't worry, I'll be telling you more about that as we go. But just quickly over what this schedule looked for us. So we had 4 different stages where we had obviously a setup where we'll start with objectives, deciding who are the people that we need to talk to, and basically putting together a discussion guide. After that, it's recruitment. We found, and I have seen that in quite a few of the places that I have worked with. I think recruitment's one of the things that really gets in the way of those continuous habits. It's quite time consuming. It's really hard to do if you're by yourself or if you don't have the right capacity. In this case, we went and we used third party agency. So we outsourced the recruiting, but I know that that's not an option for every organization. So there might be different ways to try and do that. You might want to try and work closely with some of your customer facing functions, like sales, customer success, customer support. They might help you to do that. If you have a research team, you might try to get them to help you, but you also don't want to have like people who are really specialized and they can be more beneficial into doing the actual field work to spend a lot of time on recruitment. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you should try to see how you can make them work without being a burden on your team. And you should either try to outsource or automate it in some way, so it can actually scale and be sustainable thing that you do continuously. After that, it comes the field work. In our cases, we were doing interviews, and that's what we'll try to do at the end. And then finally, analysis and reporting. That's when you do all of the data management, synthesis, analyze findings, and basically look for those opportunities that you want to go after. So our setup usually took 1 week to go over. Today, we'll try to do something in 10 minutes together. I have quite a few of those things prepared, but let's go for it. So there's probably a few more things that go in there, but the 4 things that I wanted to point out are those ones. As I said, deciding on objectives is really important. It's something that you should aim to do whenever you start to do any kind of like discovery or research activity. You need to know what you're trying to achieve. And in our case, what we usually try to do is actually get input from the different product teams or member on the product teams in order to understand what are the questions that they need to answer, what they're working on, so we can actually have a holistic view on what we are trying to achieve. As I said, I have tried to come up with a few objectives for today. Usually, I would suggest limiting 2 to 3 objectives whenever you're doing interviews, especially if they're going to be about 1 hour. You don't want to overwhelm people and you want to have time to actually follow up on things. This is just a formula that you can try to follow in terms of what goes into an objective. So you need to have some action, specific details, measurement or conditions on what you're looking for, and then who do you want to talk to. In terms of what we'll be trying to understand today, one of the objectives that they had was to understand the profile and motivations of Product Unleashed attendees. So basically all of you, why are you here? What are you trying to get out of today? And just where do you work, and a bit more context about your background. And then the other objective, actually identify if you're facing any challenges whenever you're doing research and trying to uncover needs of your customers. So with that, the objectives are done. After that, defining actually who you need to talk to. Again, I think today it's quite easy, but basically the more detail you put into that, you'll be able to find people who really fit with the profile that you're looking for. If you have a few different audiences, you should try to have different screeners and make sure that you actually have equal amount of people in the 2 groups. Just an example for today. So what I'm looking for is someone who works in a product company with any of these responsibilities. So maybe someone who is defining the product vision and roadmap, someone who is conducting research, creating designs, and so on, and so on. Basically looking someone who is working within a product team. In the case of today, we're just going to be doing 10-minute interviews, and we have 5 groups. Recruitment screen are done. Discussion guide. So this is something that you can actually find on the table. Everyone should have a set of these discussion guides. In the beginning, there's just a few tips on things that I'm going to cover in the moment, but basically this is the discussion guide that's going to be used by the moderators. The reason why we had discussion guides when we were running this program is that we didn't always have only one moderator. We wanted to get more people involved whenever we were running the interviews. And the discussion guide allowed us to make sure that we are consistent when we are interviewing. And it was also a guidance for the moderator to know what they need to cover. It's something to be used flexibly depending on the conversation, but it does provide the right structure. And it was very helpful for people, especially who maybe didn't have that much experience moderating, but they wanted to try how they're doing. Just explaining what's in the discussion guides that you have at the moment. So there's a topic that's usually covering and showing what objectives we have. Basically, you should have something that, a topic that cover and relates to some of the objectives that you have. For each topic, you'd have key discussion points and props. I'm going to be telling you a bit more about props at the moment. And this is just for timekeeping. So this is showing you how much time you need to spend on a topic. And as you move forward, this is the total time that you're spending speaking to someone. You can take a look later. Some of you should be moderating today, so start thinking about that, but about this in a second. Just a few things about the discussion guide and how you can actually use them and lead the conversation. So it's really good and good practice to start with a little introduction about yourself and about what the session will be about. There's an example in there, and if you look at the bottom of the page, there's also the structure of what you should cover. But basically, as I said, just give a little bit an introduction about yourself, how long the session will be, what you're trying to achieve, maybe who is doing that, and just reassure people that there's no right or wrong question and you're really interested in hearing about their experiences. If you're going to record the session, you should also get consent from people and let them know why you're doing that. Another important thing, try to build some rapport with the person before you go straight to questions. So just try to start with asking them a little bit about themselves. Where do they live? What do they like to do in their free time? Anything that will help them to loosen up, and just you'll notice that it's very different, the conversation after that. Finally, around the questions, try to start with asking broader questions and then narrow them down, which is also the way you kind of like probe for more information. And this is where you get all of the questions that start with W. So what do you mean by that? When did this last happen? All of those ones. Use the why question sparingly, because people can get a bit defensive if you just ask them directly, why did you do that? They can take it in the wrong way. So with that, discussion guides are done. And finally, we want to assign some roles. So why was it important for us to assign roles? I think in general, it's really important if you want to involve more people. And in our case, we really wanted to have more people from the product team involved. That meant product managers, engineering, data people, to make sure that the session is running smoothly, both for those people and for the interviewee. It's very important that everyone knows what they're doing. And they know what they're accountable for during the session. So if you look around the papers, you should have one paper, which is called Roles and Responsibilities, and it should have those roles written in there. You should also have somewhere a pen around, and you'll notice that there are 5 roles and there are, I think, about 5 people in a group. What I want you to do, so we have those roles, and I want to have one person to be assigned to a role from each group. The important ones, and make sure that we have them, we really want to have a moderator from the group, so that's going to be the person who is going to use the discussion guide and lead the interview. Then obviously, if we want to have an interview, we need a participant. So that's going to be the interviewee, someone offering their insights and experiences, ideally someone who is working on a product team. We want to have a note taker. You also have a note taker guide where you can take some of the notes, and there's specific structure. Then an observer. This is always good for people who just want to focus on understanding behavior, but they don't want to engage. And then write up lead. We'll probably won't have time to do that today, but that's the person who is responsible for writing up a summary of all of the findings and opportunities and making sure that they're shared with the team. So I'll give you a few minutes just to decide on the roles. I'll also go around just in case you have some questions before we move on.